Do you remember that bit from Sesame Street where they would show 4 items and one of them would be a little different and they'd sing this song, "One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song?" And then you had to figure out which of the 4 was different. It seems from the earliest moments of life we have to figure out or compare in order to survive. We think about a baby who must read mom's face to think, okay, well, is she happy? Is she sad? Is she scared? And then this other guy shows up. He's not mom. He must be dad. And very early on we figure out circle is not a square, little or big, hot or cold, safe or unsafe. Babies are figuring out the world around them and they do that through comparison. So too, as we navigate our way through life and go to school, we think, I'm not as tall as him, or I'm not as strong as her, or I'm not as smart as him. And that carries over into our everyday lives, even in our workplace. Which supervisor should I go to about this issue? Which one is going to give me what I want? Or why is he mad at me? Or why is my wife upset with me? Or where am I going to get the better deal? Comparisons are important for navigating through this difficult and complicated world. But it's also easy for us to take that comparison and bring it into our life of faith. We see this play out in our gospel today. We hear about Peter and John. Peter is speaking to Jesus, and this is the 3rd time Jesus has appeared after his resurrection. And this has happened right after that famous passage where Jesus says to Peter, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" Those 3 times that Peter affirms his love for Jesus after denying him 3 times. And Peter does something curious. He says, "You know, Lord, why are you calling me to be a leader? Why do you want me to be the leader of the church? Surely this other guy, John, is way more qualified than I am." Don't we do that in our own lives of faith? Gosh, she's way more holier than I am. He was way more well-read than I am. She knows way more about the Catholic faith than I do. I'm not as holy as him. And yet, into this context, Jesus says to Peter, look, I want both of you. I have called both of you in unique ways. So you don't need to compare yourself to him because he's going to have his own unique special role. Peter's role will be to be the leader of the early church and to help guide it through difficult moments, ultimately leading to his martyrdom in Rome. John, on the other hand, is called to take care of Jesus' mother, Mary, and to be a constant prayer warrior for the early Christian community. He will be the one who will have to carry the cross of seeing all of the other apostles be martyred. He will be the one who will, as we hear at the end of this gospel, sit down and write this very gospel. Peter and John had their own unique roles. God called them for different purposes, but ultimately called them to follow him. And it is inviting them to move from comparison to celebration. How are we called to celebrate the differences of the people around us, rather than compare ourselves? I think St. Therese of Lisieux, who's this great spiritual doctor of the church, has a great insight on this. When she uses the analogy of a flower garden. And she talks about this as the uniqueness of each of our callings. She says this, "The splendor of the rose and the whiteness of the lily do not rob the little violet of its scent, nor the daisy of its simple charm. If every tiny flower wanted to be a rose, spring would lose its loveliness." What Therese had to learn too is that she was called in a unique way to follow Christ in a unique way. So to go back to that song, none of us is like the other. Each of us is different. Each of us is called differently. But each of us are called to follow him and to celebrate our differences today.